Egyptian Empire, the Eternal Kingdom. Egypt ruled for 3,000 years, longer than Christianity has existed. Starting around 3100 BC, when King Narmer united Upper and Lower Egypt, they built an empire that makes modern nations look temporary. Picture this scale. When Cleopatra ruled Egypt, the pyramids were already 2,500 years old. She lived closer to the iPhone than to the pyramid's construction. The Great Pyramid used 2.3 million stone blocks, each weighing 3 tons, placed so precisely you can't slip a knife blade between them. At its peak under Thutmose III around 1450 BC, Egypt controlled from Syria to Sudan, 1.2 million square kilometers. They had the world's first peace treaty, first labor strike, first known surgical procedures. Their irrigation systems turned desert into the ancient world's breadbasket, feeding 3 million people. Egypt invented so much we take for granted. Paper from papyrus, the 365-day calendar, makeup, toothpaste, even bowling. Their medical texts described brain surgery 3,000 years before Europe discovered anatomy. The empire finally fell to Rome in 30 BC when Cleopatra died. But here's what's incredible. Egyptian culture was so powerful that conquerors became Egyptian. Greeks, Romans, Arabs all adopted Egyptian customs rather than destroying them. Today, their monuments generate billions in tourism. Their artifacts fill every major museum. An empire that ended 2,000 years ago still dominates our imagination. Persian Empire, the first superpower. Cyrus the Great created history's first humanitarian empire. In 550 BC, he overthrew the Median Empire, then conquered Lydia and Babylon in just 20 years. By 480 BC, Persia controlled 44% of the world's population, the highest percentage any empire ever ruled. Think about that. Almost half of all humans alive answered to the Persian emperor. The empire stretched from India to Greece, covering 5.5 million square kilometers. They built the Royal Road, 2,500 kilometers long, where mounted couriers could cross the empire in 7 days. Neither snow, nor rain, nor heat stopped them. Sound familiar? The U.S. Postal Service motto comes from Persian messengers. But Persia wasn't about crushing cultures. Cyrus freed the Jews from Babylon, rebuilt their temple, and created the first human rights charter. The Cyrus Cylinder, found in 1879, declares religious freedom and racial equality 2,500 years before the UN Declaration. They invented the first postal system, standardized currency, and created underground irrigation that still works today. Their provincial system of satrapies became the model for every future empire. Alexander the Great conquered Persia in 331 BC, but Persian administration was so efficient he kept it intact. Rome copied it. Islamic Caliphates adopted it. Even the British Empire used Persian governance models in India. Persian words like paradise, magic, and orange entered every language. Their influence shaped Judaism, Christianity, and Islam.
The Macedonian Empire. Alexander's Lightning War. Alexander conquered more land than any person in history, and did it in just 13 years. Born in 356 BC, he became king at 20 and immediately set out to conquer the world. By 30, he controlled 5.2 million square kilometers from Greece to India. His speed was insane. He never lost a single battle despite being outnumbered in every major engagement. At Gaugamela, his 47,000 troops defeated Darius's 250,000 Persians. He conquered the impregnable Tyre by building a causeway to the island city. He crossed the Hindu Kush Mountains in winter, something locals said was impossible. Alexander didn't just conquer, he transformed. He founded 20 cities named Alexandria, each becoming a cultural fusion center. He married his officers to local nobility, creating the first multicultural empire. He adopted Persian customs, wore local dress, and promoted cultural mixing that created Hellenistic civilization. His empire fragmented immediately after his death at 32, probably from typhoid, though some say poison. But the cultural impact lasted millennia. Greek became the universal language from Egypt to India. The New Testament was written in Greek because of Alexander. Buddhist art adopted Greek styles. Scientific knowledge flowed between civilizations. Alexander proved one person could change the world. He covered 22,000 miles on foot, fighting from the front in every battle. His empire lasted just 13 years, but Hellenistic culture shaped civilization for 1,000 years.
Roman Empire, the Eternal Empire. Rome went from a muddy village to ruling 5 million square kilometers and 70 million people. At its peak under Trajan in 117 AD, you could walk from Scotland to Iran, from Germany to Sudan, and never leave Roman territory. They built 400,000 kilometers of roads, many still used today. Roman concrete was superior to modern concrete. The Pantheon's dome, poured in 126 AD, remains the world's largest unreinforced concrete dome. They had apartment buildings 10 stories tall, shopping malls with 150 stores, and fast food restaurants serving 100,000 customers daily. Rome's military machine was unstoppable. Legionaries trained 4 hours daily, could march 30 kilometers in 5 hours carrying 30 kilograms of gear. They built a siege wall around enemy siege walls. At Masada, they constructed an entire mountain ramp to reach Jewish rebels. But Rome's real genius was integration. Conquered peoples became Roman citizens. Emperors came from Spain, Africa, and the Balkans. They didn't destroy cultures, they absorbed them. Roman law became the foundation for every Western legal system. The Western Empire fell in 476 AD, but the Eastern Byzantine Empire lasted until 1453. Latin remained Europe's universal language for 1,500 years. Every European language has thousands of Latin words. The US Senate, Russian Tsar, and German Kaiser all derive from Roman titles. Rome proved empires could last through inclusion, not just conquest.
Han Dynasty, the Middle Kingdom. While Rome ruled the West, Han China controlled the East. From 206 BC to 220 AD, the Han Dynasty ruled 6 million square kilometers and 60 million people, 1/4 of humanity. They created China as we know it. The Han invented paper in 105 AD, changing human civilization forever. Before paper, knowledge was carved in stone or written on expensive silk. Suddenly, information could spread cheaply. They also invented the compass, seismograph, wheelbarrow, and crossbow trigger mechanism that Europe wouldn't develop for 1,000 years. Their civil service exam system was revolutionary. Instead of hereditary nobles, government positions went to whoever scored highest on tests. A peasant who studied hard could become prime minister. This meritocracy created the world's most efficient bureaucracy, processing census data for 60 million people without computers. The Han Silk Road, established under Emperor Wu, connected China to Rome. Chinese silk was worth its weight in gold in Rome. Roman glass was treasured in China. Ideas, technologies, and diseases traveled 7,000 kilometers, creating the first global economy. When the Han fell, China fragmented for 350 years, but the Han culture was so strong that 92% of Chinese people still call themselves Han today. Their writing system, philosophy, and governmental structure survived every invasion. The Han proved cultural unity could outlast political control.
Mongol Empire, the world conquerors. The Mongols created the largest contiguous land empire ever, 33 million square kilometers, from Korea to Poland. That's bigger than Africa. Genghis Khan started with maybe 100,000 nomads and conquered empires with millions of soldiers. Their secret? Speed and terror. Mongol cavalry could ride 100 kilometers daily, living on mare's milk and dried meat. Each warrior had 5 horses, switching mounts to maintain speed. They'd appear from nowhere, destroy everything, and vanish. Cities that resisted were erased. Urgench's 1.2 million people were killed in a week. Cities that surrendered prospered. Genghis Khan was surprisingly progressive. He abolished torture, established religious freedom, created the first international postal system, and promoted based on merit, not birth. His generals included former enemies who proved themselves. Women could divorce and own property, rights Europe wouldn't grant for 600 years. The Mongols killed 40 million people, 11% of the world's population. But they also connected the world. They protected trade routes, allowing safe travel from Europe to China. Marco Polo, Islamic scholars, and Chinese engineers traveled freely. Gunpowder, printing, and navigation spread globally. Genetically, 0.5% of the world, 16 million people, descend from Genghis Khan. The Mongol Empire fragmented by 1368, but they'd created global trade networks that launched the Age of Exploration. They proved nomads could conquer civilizations and change the world by connecting it.
Byzantine Empire, Rome never died. The Byzantine Empire was Rome 2.0, lasting 1,000 years after Rome fell. From Constantine founding Constantinople in 330 AD until Ottoman conquest in 1453, they preserved classical civilization while Europe entered the Dark Ages. Constantinople was the medieval world's New York, population over 1 million, when London had 50,000. The city's walls, built in 413 AD, were never breached for 1,000 years. They had a complex bureaucracy, professional army, and Greek fire, medieval napalm whose formula remains unknown. Justinian nearly restored the full Roman Empire in 533 to 540 AD, reconquering Italy, North Africa, and Spain. His legal code, the Corpus Juris Civilis, became the basis for European law. His wife Theodora, a former actress, ruled as co-emperor, unthinkable in medieval Europe. Byzantine preserved 90% of ancient Greek and Roman texts we have today. While Europe lost literacy, Byzantine schools taught Aristotle, Plato, and Homer. When Constantinople fell, Byzantine scholars fled to Europe, bringing ancient knowledge that sparked the Renaissance. They gave us the fork, hospitals with medical schools, and the flamethrower. Their golden mosaics influenced Islamic art. Their Orthodox Christianity converted Russia and Eastern Europe. The empire survived 1,123 years, longer than any other empire. They called themselves Romans until the end. When Sultan Mehmed conquered Constantinople, he declared himself Caesar. Byzantine influence shaped both Islamic and Christian civilizations.
Islamic Caliphates, the knowledge keepers.
In just 100 years, Islam expanded from one city to controlling 13 million square kilometers, from Spain to India. The Rashidun and Umayyad Caliphates conquered more land faster than any empire except Alexander's. Muhammad died in 632 AD. By 732 AD, Muslim armies had conquered Persia, Egypt, North Africa, Spain, and Central Asia. They defeated two superpowers, Byzantine and Sassanid Persia, simultaneously. At the Battle of Yarmouk, 25,000 Arabs defeated 100,000 Byzantines. But the Islamic Empire's real achievement was knowledge. The House of Wisdom in Baghdad collected and translated every Greek, Persian, and Indian text they could find. While Europe lost Greek knowledge, Muslims preserved and expanded it. Al-Khwarizmi invented algebra. The word comes from his book Al-Jabr. They developed the scientific method 500 years before Europe. Islamic scholars invented the hospital, university, and library as we know them. They performed cataract surgery, described blood circulation, and mapped the stars. Every star with an Arabic name, Altair, Betelgeuse, and Rigel, was named during this period. They created the first global trade network, stretching from Cordoba to Canton. The check, credit system, and corporation were Islamic inventions. Coffee, sugar, and cotton spread globally through Islamic traders. The Mongols destroyed Baghdad in 1258, ending the Golden Age, but Islamic preservation of ancient knowledge made the Renaissance possible. Ottoman Empire, the last caliphate. The Ottomans ruled for 624 years, from 1299 to 1923. At their peak, they controlled 5.2 million square kilometers across 3 continents, ruling from Budapest to Baghdad, from Crimea to Yemen. They started as one of many Turkish tribes in Anatolia, but they had a secret weapon, the devshirme system. They took Christian boys as taxes, converted them to Islam, and trained them as elite janissary soldiers or administrators. These slaves could become grand viziers. Imagine a slave becoming prime minister. This created fierce loyalty and competent administration. Constantinople's conquest in 1453 by 21-year-old Mehmed II shocked Europe. He used the world's largest cannon, 27 feet long, firing 600-kilogram stone balls. The Byzantine Empire's capital became Istanbul, transforming from Christianity's eastern center to Islam's greatest city. Suleiman the Magnificent controlled the Mediterranean, making it an Ottoman lake. His fleet of 400 ships dominated from Gibraltar to the Black Sea. Ottoman control of trade routes forced Europeans to find ocean routes to Asia, accidentally discovering the Americas. They introduced coffee to Europe, created military bands that inspired Mozart, and developed surgical instruments still used today. The Ottoman legal system influenced modern international law. When they finally fell after World War I, their dissolution created today's Middle East conflicts. Every current border dispute from Bosnia to Iraq stems from Ottoman collapse. Spanish Empire, the first global empire. Spain created the first empire where the sun never set. From Columbus's voyage in 1492 to losing Cuba in 1898, Spain controlled 19.4 million square kilometers, 13% of Earth's land. Two events created Spanish supremacy. Granada's conquest in 1492 ended 700 years of Islamic rule, and Columbus discovered the Americas the same year. Within 50 years, conquistadors with a few hundred men toppled million-strong empires. Cortez conquered the Aztecs with 600 men. Pizarro defeated the Incas with 168. How? Disease killed 90% of Native Americans. 56 million people died, causing global cooling as farms returned to forest. Spanish steel, horses, and gunpowder faced obsidian weapons and no cavalry. But mainly, they exploited civil wars, making local allies who did most of the fighting. Spain extracted 180 tons of gold and 17,000 tons of silver from the Americas. This wealth funded European wars for 200 years, but caused massive inflation, ultimately ruining Spain's economy. Spanish dollars became the world's first global currency. The US dollar sign comes from Spanish pieces of 8. They gave the world chocolate, tomatoes, potatoes, and corn, foods that now feed billions. Spanish became the world's second most spoken language. Latin America's 650 million people are Spain's living legacy. But forcing Catholicism destroyed irreplaceable cultures. The demographic catastrophe remains history's deadliest pandemic. Spain proved global empires were possible, but showed the devastating cost of colonization. Mughal Empire, the jewel of Asia. The Mughals ruled India for 331 years, controlling 4 million square kilometers and 150 million people, 1/4 of humanity. At their peak, they generated 25% of global GDP, making India the world's richest nation. Babur, descended from both Genghis Khan and Tamerlane, founded the empire in 1526 with just 12,000 men. He defeated Sultan Ibrahim's 100,000 troops using cannons and matchlock muskets, the first gunpowder empire in India. His memoir, the Baburnama, is so detailed we know what he ate for breakfast 500 years ago. Akbar the Great, though illiterate, created India's golden age. He abolished religious taxes, married Hindu princesses, and held debates between Muslims, Hindus, Christians, and atheists. His administration used Hindu numerals that became our number system. The Mughals introduced Persian art, creating the distinctive Indo-Islamic architecture. Shah Jahan built the Taj Mahal for his wife Mumtaz, 20,000 workers, 1,000 elephants, 22 years, costing $1 billion in today's money. It's perfectly symmetrical, except for Shah Jahan's off-center tomb, added by his son who imprisoned him. The British found India producing 23% of world manufacturing in 1700. By 1947, after colonial rule, it was 3%. The Mughals created modern Indian cuisine, Urdu language, and Bollywood's aesthetic roots. Their tolerance and cultural fusion created the diverse India we know today.
Qing dynasty, the last empire. The Qing dynasty peaked as Earth's largest empire by population, 432 million people, one-third of humanity, in territory covering 14.7 million square kilometers. Yet it was founded by Manchus, just 2 million people who conquered 100 million Chinese. How did so few conquer so many? The Ming dynasty was collapsing from rebellion when Manchus invaded in 1644. Chinese generals actually invited them to help fight rebels, then couldn't remove them. The Manchus kept Chinese administration, but demanded one humiliating symbol: the Q hairstyle. Chinese men had to shave their foreheads and wear a long braid or face execution. The Kangxi Emperor ruled for 61 years, history's longest reigning emperor. He learned Latin, music, and mathematics from Jesuit missionaries while conquering Mongolia, Tibet, and Taiwan. His grandson, Shanlong, expanded to maximum size, receiving tribute from Korea to Nepal. Qing China produced everything it needed, wanting nothing from Europe except silver. British addiction to Chinese tea caused massive trade deficits. Britain's solution? Sell opium to China. When China resisted, the Opium Wars began their destruction. The Qing gave us modern China's borders, Chinatowns worldwide, and Chinese restaurants on every continent. Fleeing Chinese spread their culture globally. They proved an empire could maintain distinct minority rule over a massive majority for 267 years. Their collapse in 1912 ended 4,000 years of imperial China.
British Empire, the largest ever. Britain controlled 35.5 million square kilometers, 24% of Earth's land, and 412 million people, 23% of humanity. A tiny island with 2% of the world's population ruled 1/4 of it. At noon in the British Empire, it was midnight somewhere else in the British Empire. It started with pirates. Elizabeth I licensed privateers to rob Spanish gold. The East India Company began as merchants in 1600 and ended ruling India with a private army larger than Britain's. They conquered the world not through government planning, but corporate profit. Technology was key. The Maxim gun let 50 British soldiers defeat 5,000 warriors. One battle in Sudan killed 10,000 Mahdists while losing 48 British. Steamships and telegraphs meant orders from London reached India in minutes, not months. The British divided and ruled, using local rivalries. Just 4,000 British civil servants controlled 300 million Indians. English became the global language. British legal systems govern 2 billion people today. They created 50 countries' borders, usually badly. Iraq combined 3 Ottoman provinces that hated each other. Every global conflict from Kashmir to Palestine stems from British map drawing. The empire enriched Britain through systematic looting. India's GDP dropped from 23% to 3% of global output under British rule. But they also spread industrialization, railways, and modern medicine. The British Empire created our interconnected world, then lost everything in 30 years after World War II.
Nazi Germany, the 1,000-year Reich that lasted 12. Nazi Germany controlled 3.9 million square kilometers of Europe at its peak in 1942, ruling 200 million people from France to the gates of Moscow. Hitler promised a 1,000-year empire. It lasted 12 years, but killed 75 million people, 3% of humanity. The speed was breathtaking. In 1933, Germany was broke and disarmed. By 1942, they controlled Europe from the Atlantic to the Volga. Blitzkrieg, Lightning War, conquered Poland in 35 days, France in 46 days. They invaded the Soviet Union with 3.8 million men, history's largest invasion. But this empire was built purely on destruction. While other empires built infrastructure, the Nazis built death camps. They industrialized murder. Auschwitz could kill 20,000 people daily. They planned to exterminate 31 million Slavs for living space, killed 6 million Jews, and started a war that destroyed Europe. Their technology was advanced, jet aircraft, ballistic missiles, assault rifles, but wasted on an impossible war. They fought the British Empire, Soviet Union, and the United States simultaneously. At Stalingrad, they lost an entire army. On D-Day, they faced invasion while fighting on 3 fronts. The Third Reich proved modern technology could create unprecedented destruction. Their racial ideology and industrial genocide changed how humanity views evil. Every genocide convention, war crime tribunal, and human rights declaration exists because of what the Nazis did in just 12 years. Soviet Union, the last empire attempt. The Soviet Union controlled 22.4 million square kilometers, 1/6 of Earth's land, ruling 293 million people. From 1922 to 1991, they challenged American dominance and nearly triggered nuclear war, proving empires could still emerge in the modern age. It began with the impossible. The Bolsheviks, just 20,000 revolutionaries, seized control of 170 million people in 1917. They won a civil war against 14 invading nations, then transformed a medieval agricultural society into a nuclear superpower in 40 years. Stalin's industrialization was brutal but effective. The first 5-year plan increased industrial output 250%. They built entire cities beyond the Urals, moving 10 million people and 1,500 factories east. In World War II, they produced 100,000 tanks and 140,000 aircraft, outproducing Germany 2-1. The Soviets launched the space age. Sputnik, Laika, Gagarin, they beat America at every space milestone except the moon. They eliminated illiteracy, provided universal healthcare, and guaranteed employment. Women gained equality decades before the West. But the empire was hollow. They spent 25% of GDP on military, while supermarkets stayed empty. The Chernobyl disaster revealed their dysfunction. When Gorbachev allowed freedom of speech, the empire collapsed in 2 years. The Soviet collapse created 15 countries and proved the age of empires had ended. Modern nationalism, nuclear weapons, and global communication make traditional empire impossible.